Okay, well, welcome back to the next study here in Luke. I can't even remember what week it is, like week 8 or 9 or something like that. And I have Adonis and Tanya Woods with me. Listen, these two people are some of the most positive, kind-hearted, service-oriented people that I know. I just love this couple so much, and I'm so excited for the church to hear from you guys. If this is your first time joining us, hey, we're happy that you're with us. You can go back and watch all the recordings of every single class on our YouTube page, on Facebook. And if, hey, you're joining us again, welcome back. But Adonis and Tanya, man, I love you guys so much. I don't even have the words to express how much I love you.
You.
I know you've had a busy week flying all around the country, I'm sure. But hey, let us introduce yourselves to the people.
I'm Adonis Woods. My wife Tanya. I've been a member at North Atlanta maybe 20 years now. I've been in several different ministries. I am currently heavily involved in our men's anchor ministry, which thanks to Adam and Susan for seeing something in us that brought us into that. That was the best invitation we have ever had in our lives. So thank you, brother.
Yeah.
That ministry has really transformed my life to the point where I see God in different perspectives. I'm able to see, show, and share Him with others because I see what's happening in Anchor and just being able to do things in a different light. My wife and I are also active in our what we used to call our marriage ministry. We've renamed it to our couples ministry, so we're active in that as well. Just blessed to be a part of North Atlanta. We miss being able to hug and touch and communicate face to face with everyone, but we love you guys. We miss you guys. So until then, we're going to communicate with you like this.
Come on, Tanya.
Hi, my name is Tanya Woods, and I'm Adonis's wife. Really embracing our church family. We miss them. Just hugging onto one another and just loving. I really miss my church family. I have 2 grandkids. I have a 30-year-old daughter, and I moved. Once we got married, I moved from New York to here, and I'm just with this wonderful husband that I have. So supportive.
I said you guys have been flying all over the country. Was that true? Were you guys flying this week?
Yes.
Yes, because they're Delta. Just for those who don't know, they're Delta flight attendants. So that's what they do for a vocation. But who they are is children of God and just great servants. And so I'm so excited to have you guys teach us this morning. We are in Luke 9. 21, we're going to go 21 through 45. Whatever you want to teach us through those verses, we'd love to hear and be blessed by it. So I want to turn it over to you guys to start our teaching.
So I'm going to start with Jesus predicts his death. Jesus strictly warned them not to tell this to anyone. And he said, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and he must be killed, and on the 3rd day be raised to life. Then he said to them all, whoever wants to be disciple must deny themselves and to take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? Whoever is ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes to his glory, and in the glory of the Father and of the holy angels. Truly I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the kingdom of God.
So in that passage, and you have this vision of who you think Jesus is, who you think his purpose is to come in and take over Rome and restore Israel back to the Israelites. And then Jesus throws this out there at you. Peter, he rebukes it. If we flip over to Matthew 17, I believe it is.
Are you using an old school Bible over there? Are you flipping pages?
Yes, sir. We go, brother.
Okay, Jesus predicts his death. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed on the third day, be raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Never, Lord, he said, this shall never happen to you. Jesus turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. Then Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it.
So, what in the world is going through Peter's mind when Jesus tells him, no, I'm going to die? And Peter's like, no, you're not. But Jesus has to re-emphasize to him, this is my mission. This is why I was given birth, so I can die. If that were to be said to us even today, we would have done, or would we have done the same thing? Because the Bible, this part of the Bible wasn't written when Peter was speaking that. We know Jesus's mission now because we have the Bible to reference on. Peter didn't have that. He had Jesus. He had a whole different concept of who, what, and why Jesus was. Jesus had a different purpose in mind. So that's something that we need to be reflective on even today. Our purposes that we think Jesus has put into our hearts, is that really what his purpose is for us? So instead of us putting our agenda on God and wanting him to give us a stamp of approval, do we really look at and say, Jesus, God, what is your purpose for me? Where, how, and when can I be of a servant leadership in your kingdom? So I think that's what that says to me.
That's so good. We're supposed to be kingdom people. We're supposed to be living for the kingdom. And when we're not, sometimes that rebuke is pretty harsh, right? I mean, like he just gave to Peter. Of course, it's out of love, I believe. But the truth of the matter is we are to be living for the kingdom, not for the world. That's good.
In the same way, Jesus rebuked Peter was, I mean, that was his right-hand man.
Yeah.
But he had to rebuke him, not for Peter's sake. Peter didn't know what he was saying. Jesus was rebuking Satan.
Yes.
Distracting him from his mission.
Ooh, that's so good.
And so that's what we have to do when someone says something to you, your right-hand man, your right-hand woman, your child, your spouse, whatever. If they say something to you and you know it's not a part of who, what, how, and where God has called you to do or to be, you've got to rebuke that through in love. But you have to rebuke it, because if you allow that mustard seed of a thought from your loved one to set in, it's going to grow.
That's good.
So we have to do that same thing, that even in that, being like Jesus, rebuke Satan out of your mind, out of your heart, because he's going to come through someone that you love. It's not going to come from somebody that you disrespect, because you're not going to listen to that person. Satan is going to use people that you admire, that you look up to, that you love, to feed division or doubt through you.
Wow.
So we have to be very careful and cautious, not just who we spend time with, but what we allow to penetrate our hearts from other people.
From that passage that I just read, it says here, reflecting on what I just read, was that Peter was unwittingly doing the same thing Satan tried to do in the wilderness temptation, urging Jesus to act on his own apart from the Father.
So I know you guys were just reading from Matthew, and the wordage is very similar, but in Luke 24, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Whoever loses their life for me will save it. I just want to make a plug. A few years ago at the movement retreat, my wife, Susan, she actually was one of our speakers. and she taught a little bit from these verses. And it's still to this day some of the most powerful teaching that I've heard on it. So I'm just going to plug that and say, hey, you can go back and watch that
There you go.
on our North Atlanta YouTube page. She had a great teaching that she shares a little bit about what does that mean and what that meant for her life. So anyway, just a quick plug of that. But there is a cost, right? There is a cost to following Christ. He's making that clear. But they're worldly costs, not kingdom costs.
Yes, indeed. And that's the picture we have to look at. I mean, you know, Tanya and I were talking about, we talk about it all the time, you know, just you look at what's happening in today's environment. I mean, pick a topic, you know, coronavirus, anything, you know, we're so divided on everything. We're looking at what we have in difference, but we're not looking at what we have in common. So you focus on what we have in common, and that is where you begin to bring yourself together. But we look at surface. God created us to work from inside out. We're all wired, you know, with a heart, you know, lungs. We all have the same inner workings. But that's where he works from. Who and how we are inside, not what we look like outside. And
we talked about that a few lessons ago, Adonis. We talked about when you overemphasize similarities, you get conformity. But if you overemphasize differences, you get fragmentation. And so you have to find that commonality. And for us as believers, that's commonalities in Christ. And then from there, we can grow and learn, disciple, and become more like Jesus together when our foundation is rooted there.
Yeah. And what we need to look at, what does your love look like? Because that's who God is. That's what our Bibles are saying. We are created in God's image, but we're looking for this type of an image when we should be looking for this type of an image. Who is he in love? We all express love differently. We all want to receive love differently, but love is love. Love is an action. It's not a fuzzy, warm feeling. It's an action. It's intentional. And that's what Jesus is doing here. And we have to do that same thing, be intentional about it.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to jump into the Transfiguration. About 8 days after Jesus said this, he took Peter, John, and James with him and went up onto a mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. 2 men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. Peter and his companions were very sleepy, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men standing with him. As the men were leaving Jesus, Peter said to him, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He didn't know what he was saying. While he was speaking, a cloud appeared and covered them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. A voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my son, whom I have chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. The disciples kept this to themselves and did not tell anyone at the time what they had seen. That's pretty powerful. Because if you're up there on the mountain, you know, I don't know what Peter, James, and John were thinking they were going up there for, other than to maybe pray and have some isolated time alone. They took the time to rest, take a nap while Jesus went to go pray. They wake up and see Elijah and Moses standing there with Jesus. The law of the inner circle, what I think Jesus was trying to do, he's preparing his men to represent him. And this is where, in my Bible, it has a note of the law of the inner circle. 3 of Jesus's key men saw him transfigured on a mountain. He had specifically chosen these 3 to share the experience with him, one of several special times he arranged for Peter, James, and John. While the other 9 disciples waited at the foot of the mountain for their comrades to return, the inner circle witnessed a miracle. Jesus, the ultimate trainer and mentor, did things this way to prepare some key players for future leadership. In that moment, Jesus selected a group of key men, verse 28. He took them to a special place up on the mountain, isolated, so he can share that time with them specifically. Spent time praying with them. Then he shared an unusual experience with them. It's verse 30 and 31. Let's reread that. So verse 30, two men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. So that's a pretty unusual experience that is being shared. He provided a lasting memory for them. Verse 32. Peter and his companions were very sleepy, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the two men standing with him. As the men were leaving, Peter said to him, "Master, it is good for us to be here." So that's something that they will never, ever forget. Next, he invested special time speaking with them. Verses 34, 35. While he was speaking, a cloud appeared and covered them. And as they were afraid, they entered the cloud. A voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my son, whom I have chosen. Listen to him." Then next, he gave them a secret history with him that prepared them for the future. Verse 36. When the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. The disciples kept this to themselves and did not tell anyone at the time what they had seen. Why do you think they didn't tell anybody? Maybe nobody's going to believe what we said, so just keep it to ourselves. Maybe they were afraid. But again, let's tie that into today. How is Jesus preparing us? Where is he selecting, or where are we being selective of who we spend our time with? Do we just randomly spend time with anyone, or are we being intentional? Like it says here in the first, he selected a group of key men to spend time with. Why do you do that? You want to be intentional about showing and sharing with them something. If you're mentoring, like in our anchor ministry, that's very intentional, very specific. And you tend to gravitate to men, and they gravitate to you with, how do I say? We see things in each other, and we're specific in who, how, and what we do with that person. And even outside of that, when we're at work, we're very specific, intentional about when we show and share who God is through us. Doesn't matter what you're talking about, or even if you're not talking, if you are showing God in your actions, how you treat people around you. When someone cuts you off in traffic, or somebody jumps in front of you in line, or something like that, who, how, and where are you showing that you are a disciple of Jesus? Or does that moment go in your back pocket and you say, I'll pull you out later when I'm back in the car? He took them to a special place. For me, that's when I spend time with my close inner circle. That's not something I want to go out into a loud, noisy place. And I want to have intimate, private time with my inner circle, so we can share with each other, whatever we need to share, even if it's just time. You want to be specific and intentional about doing that. I don't really know of any unusual experiences that I would share, but you don't know when you get together, like we've always said, where two or more are gathered, there he is. So I don't think it's up to us to provide the unusual experience. I think when you have the intention of coming together, God creates the unusual experience. And that's something we never forget. And we've had that many, many times. provide a lasting memory for them. I think that speaks for itself. Invested special time speaking with them. That's invaluable. That's the one thing that is not reproducible is time. Once it's gone, it's gone. You can always go from having money to not having money and get it again. You can never regain time. So what you do with it, you've got to invest it wisely. And that's what it says here. Invested special time speaking with them. And that you're setting foundations for what they're going to do.
He was at that time when he was at the mountain, and his clothing was pure white. Even his feature was different. He was setting a vision to his disciples, and that were so confused they didn't know what was happening at that moment. But we were just talking about that yesterday, how scared they were to see Jesus in that state and not understanding. And Jesus was simply just creating the vision of what is to happen.
Right.
And that's what we were discussing yesterday.
Yeah.
But going back to what Adonis was saying, being intentional, I'm going through a program right now which is working on self, and I have become so aware and so intentional with developing a deeper relationship with God. And in doing that, I have realized how wonderfully made I've been created by God. And when I I'm more aware of my surroundings. So when I go out to do anything, as far as go shopping or whatever, I'm being intentional with people, because people do matter, and people like to be seen, recognized, or just putting on a smile on someone's face just to make their day with any simple gesture. And that's when I go out, I'm always intentional of who I'm around, and I do express that love first to others.
I love that you guys keep using the word intentional. We didn't plan for this. This is, you guys just keep on saying it, but that is the word that we've been using for the last 3 years around discipling at our church. We want to be intentional because it's not just going to happen, and I never really thought about this aspect with the Transfiguration, is the fact that Jesus knew what he was doing. He knew who he was going to invite, where it was going to happen, what he was going to teach, this intentionality around that. And which reminds me of a theme that we're talking about throughout Luke, and that's discipleship, because that's really what you guys are speaking of, is discipleship. In order to do that, you have to have intentionality. Clearly, this is Jesus once again showing us his intentionality around equipping, discipling his disciples to continue to carry out the message and do kingdom work.
A prime example, I had a young lady just creating a vendor list for my business, and I heard good things about her, and I said, let me try her out before I can refer her to any of my clients. She came in, did the first level, the downstairs level, and she cleaned my whole home. I was very, very satisfied with her services. We spent, after she finished, we sat in the rocking chair in front of the home, and we were just talking. And it just to take that time just to listen to her, it was very, very well spent. And as we conversating, she's telling me she has a deep relationship with God, and we were talking about God. That was our whole conversation. And I was being intentional in listening to what she was saying to me. And I remember one thing that really, really stood with me is that she said, I don't expect anything from anyone, but I'm not into, shoes and shopping and all that. I do love purses, and my birthday is coming. It's approaching, and I have a friend of mine that's going to take pictures of me. And I'm like, that's great. So that day I was intentional, and I went and I brought her a purse. just to make her day. And I said, come by tomorrow. I would like to see you. And she came. And she was crying. She was crying. And it made me feel good because I made someone feel important. You know, I didn't disregarded her, but you know, she's a part of me now. And it made me feel good to make her feel special.
Mm.
So that's just being God.
Come on. That's so good. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. See, I've heard that story about 2 or 3
You
times,
cried.
and it gets me emotional. So y'all excuse me, this is what I do. So this is God's love coming out.
Well, and that reminds me, Tanya, talk about the Tres Dias ministry that you've been a part of, because I know that's also been a place where God has used you and has continued to grow and mature you.
That has been a huge change in my life. Many struggles. I went with an open heart, being very receptive to the process. And after the process, I felt so good about myself. I felt renewed, was not in bondage with the things that held me back. And later on, I was invited to serve. And that was such a great gratitude for me to serve others, because I knew how it meant to be served. But to me, it was huge to serve the women that I did, because it made such a bigger impact than receiving. And I'm a very I love to give, love to serve others. And that was such a joy for me and a fulfillment as well.
Mm.
That weekend was so special.
Mm.
And I'll tell you that the transformation, we both were blessed to be able to be a part of it. The transformation that we saw, I mean, it literally was Moses on the mountaintop moment. There is nothing in any language that will ever describe who God is in that moment. And you're literally on a mountain. You're in North Georgia mountains, completely isolated, and it's just you and God up there. When I came back from my Tres Dias, she told me, I don't know what y'all did on that mountain, but I want what you did. I want what you have. And when she did it, she came back. She was, just as we talked about here in the Transfiguration, how Jesus was completely transformed. His clothes were pure white. His face was as bright as lightning. That's exactly how we felt coming back. And that was, what, maybe 6 years ago now? 6 years ago. And we are still in our transfigured selves. I mean, I don't plan to change it, because again, that goes back to being intentional. When you are looking for God's purpose in your life and you find it, you will not be the same ever again. And that's what happened with these disciples. After that moment, when they came off of that mountain with Jesus, they were not, that you can't be the same. Because everything you thought you knew is gone.
Come on.
But everything is not wasted, because what I say, everything what you were was your foundation. That's your survival. But once you come into your purpose, your meaning, and your growth, now you begin to learn how to thrive. You don't breathe the same. You don't think the same. You don't behave the same. You don't see things the same. And so that's what happened here. Same thing that happened with us and anybody else who's been through Tres Dias. That is a transformational moment. And from that, we have become, I guess, for lack of sounding like an oxymoron, severely intentional about everything that we do. All right, so where Jesus heals a demon-possessed boy. You want to read that?
Yeah, I'll read it. The next day, when they came down from the mountain, a large crowd met him. A man in the crowd called out, "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son, for he is my only child. A spirit seizes him and he suddenly screams. It throws him into a convulsion so that he foams at the mouth. It scarcely ever leaves him and is destroying him. I begged your disciples to drive it out, but they could not. You unbelievingly and perverse generation, Jesus replied, how long shall I stay with you and put up with you? Bring your son here. Even while the boy was coming, the demon threw him to the ground in a convulsion. But Jesus rebuked the impure spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father. And they were all amazed at the greatness of God.
So in that, what we look at, if we flip over to Matthew 17:14 through 21, it goes into a little bit more detail as to why they couldn't cast out that demon. So after Jesus tells them, you unbelieving and perverse generation, how long shall I stay with you? Basically, how long do I got to put up with you not knowing what you can do? In verse 19 in Matthew 17, then the disciples came to Jesus in private and asked, why couldn't we drive it out? And Jesus replied, because you have so little faith. Truly, I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. So some of the notes that I see here, that I have here, in that moment, Jesus was still mentoring his disciples. He assessed and held his disciples to accountability. Some of the things that he will do, let's see, following Jesus' transfiguration, he comes down from the mountain to find 9 of his disciples attempting to cast out a demon out of a boy. At that moment, he again becomes a mentor for his men. He commits himself to the training of the 12, believing every exposure they get becomes an opportunity for them to learn. Okay, these are some of the things that he does as a leadership mentor. He feels angry that his disciples can't do the job. I've already trained you. Why can't you get this? And take note of, are we still doing this in today? Everything that happened back then is still happening today. Technology and all this quick does not change anything in here. He assumes responsibility to model for them what they should do. Again, verse 18. Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of the boy, and he was healed at that moment. So again, he modeled for them what they were supposed to do. He evaluates their performance and assesses why they failed. They didn't have faith. So tie that into today. What are we, where, or how are we supposed to be moving mountains, changing and transforming people's lives, casting out demons? And a demon can be just a seed of doubt. Doesn't have to be convulsions on the floor and that severity. The demon can be a seed of doubt in somebody's mind. Where are we speaking into that? Where are we speaking life, purpose, intention into people's lives? It doesn't have to be a big sermon in a grocery store line. Like Tanya was saying, you just have to be intent. Small things. She bought, the lady we just met a purse, and you gave her value. So those kind of things, where are we doing those things? Those are the things God and Jesus have called us to do. And his disciples, granted, they were trying to cast out a demon, but again, I go back to say, we don't know what demons people are carrying around with them. Demons of doubt, demons of inferiority, demons of,
Not being worthy.
Not being worthy. Those are all demons. Those are all lies. So where are we casting out demons? Or are we not? We'll do, well, that's just something, they just having a bad day. I'll just pray for them privately. And that's good, but if God is calling you to go and speak, to be intentional about speaking, sharing, showing who he is, maybe that's your purpose
Mm.
for that moment. But if we don't do it, Jesus has to come back and say, how long shall I deal with you guys?
Mm.
You're still not getting it.
Mm.
It's not up to somebody else. It's up to you. And that's where I think he's saying here. Next one. He affirms the truth and holds them accountable to embrace it. That's verse 20 through 21. Yeah, same thing. He replied, because you have so little faith. Tell that mountain to move. It will move, but you have to believe it. You can't just hope it's going to move. You have to say it's going to move. Like one thing that kind of privately with the house that we're in now, this you know the history behind it, Adam. The dream house that God finally blessed us to be able to have it. But I had to tell a whole lot of mountains to move in the last hour. Literally 2 weeks before we were closing on this home, they came to us and said, well, you need another $9,000. I'm like, that's never going to happen. And so, and I had to get a demon out of my mind.
Mm.
And in my way, I prayed for a ram in the bush.
Mm.
And those kind of things, that demon was coming into my mind that this was a lie, it's never going to happen, all those kind of things. And I had to pray about that. And God was asking me, is your faith in what you want to possess, meaning things, or is your faith in me?
Mm.
And so in that moment, I'm standing in our backyard, hoping we can close on this house. And we prayed about it. We didn't just pray for this house. We prayed for our neighbors and everything. 10, 12 years ago, before we even knew who they were or where this house was going to be. So those kind of things, we've been intentional about that from even back then.
Mm.
And at the last minute, it was that close to being taken from me. And God had to transform my mind back onto him and off of this thing.
Mm.
And so that was, kind of off topic a little bit about the demon, but in my mind, there was a demon that was really setting up camp in my head. And God, I literally put this house, everything on the altar.
Mm.
And we got the keys to this house.
Mm.
And so those are the kind of things. So whatever your keys to your home are, whatever that is, you got to have faith. And mine was literally the size of a mustard seed then, because everything in me was crushed.
Mm.
But my faith in God did not waver. It could not waver, because there was nothing I could do physically about anything other than pray to God and remember who, what, and how he created me to come to him. Just like your youngest or any of your children, when they can't get something done, they're going to come to you eventually, hopefully. And that's what we are to do with God. These disciples, they didn't have the faith. They were trying to do it under their own power. You can't do anything under your own power. If you can, what's the point of having God? What's the point of him? If your children could do everything under their power, you and Susan are irrelevant. And that's a position you never want to be in as a parent.
Right.
Same way with God. He never wants to be irrelevant in our lives. And I think that's why he allows us to have moments of weakness, because in that moment of weakness, that's our direct path back to him.
And you mentioned that Jesus keeps them accountable.
Yes.
Would you guys, do you think that accountability and mentoring and discipling, because some people can look at that like, hey, this is harsh, or that's not love first, to be able to call someone up and hold them accountable. How do you guys feel about that being part of the mentoring discipleship relationship, the love first position?
By holding someone accountable?
Yep.
If you're not, how are you mentoring? So if you're mentoring someone and you're not holding them accountable, are you really loving that person? Because if you, and that's a tough question though, because I can answer it easily, but do you act on it as easily? Of course not. Because again, you have to figure where, how, when can I be intentional? Am I going to hurt that person's feeling? You might. Is that a risk I'm willing to take? Yes, if it creates a growth opportunity in that person and in me. Because as us being the mentor to the mentee, you're going to do something that you've never done before, which is potentially, you're going to rub that person the wrong way. But we look at any saying, just you got to sharpen a blade to make it sharp. You got to rub it.
Iron sharpens iron. Yep, iron sharpens iron. So, so that is tricky, right? Because it's hard to know exactly what that looks like. Because obviously, there are horror stories out there about people who have really misused their power as a mentor or a discipler. So, I don't think we need to I don't think we need to even talk about that. That's obviously not what we're talking about. Those horror stories of people,
right?
But you have examples that you have done that. I know, Tanya, I know you're a mentor in your work and what you do. But do you guys have examples of times that you guys have been mentored or you've mentored other where you've had to keep people accountable, but you're able to do it in a love first way?
Well, I have an example, holding myself accountable. I'm in the middle of a program that I'm doing and is working with the mind matrix, which how your subconscious work and how beliefs were instilled in me as a child. And I saw myself different because I didn't know how to deal with those beliefs. But now that I'm in the program, I'm going through this process of facing the way how I perceive myself and the way how I think about myself. And I'm holding myself accountable. In the process, it does hurt. It literally, uh, it's facing my demons. Um, and it's the hardest thing to do because I have to write it in paper, be relatable to, and be connected to my feelings, which I've never did before. It does hurt. It doesn't feel good. It feels very uncomfortable. But if I want to become the person that God created me to be, I have to go through that process. I have to peel the onion, each layer, so that I can get to the root of it and really know who I am and how I'm going to serve others. Because if I don't know how to love self and serve myself, how can I serve other people? How can I be intentional with other people if I don't deal with my demons? And that is a process that I'm going through as we speak. And I've learned to love myself, accept myself completely, which is something that I didn't know how to do before. Because I always, we women are wired to be nurturers, and we tend to forget about ourselves completely and just serve others. But this is my time to shine. I need to be healthy in all aspects, just like God created me to be. And that's what I'm working on now.
Wow. Well, that's really good. Yeah. Holding yourself accountable can sometimes be the hardest part.
Yes, it is.
When it comes to our spiritual maturity and growth. Thank you for sharing that. Well, so I want to ask you guys one more question as we kind of close out. What's the final message that you would want to give as our class thinks about chapter 9, 20, whatever we started, what was it, 21 45? What would you want them to take away? What's the final word that you would give?
I don't know. I think that we have to do our part as missionaries. I see that as reflecting, like when I think about that, I think about how Jesus sacrificed himself on that cross. And I see it like, I don't want to let him down because he did this great thing for me. And he left a legacy behind for us to be missionaries and and reach to people in all kinds of level of love. And that's what I see as being intentional, being committed, being responsible to yourself. Um, and, and it's just loving unto others. You know, first, you know, to me, I'm so grateful and love God for what he did for me. So I owe that to him. And that's how I'm being intentional with others. Just having that reminder every day, who am I going to bless? Who am I going to, you know, have a relationship with today? So those are the things that when I do those things, I feel good about myself because, you know, I'm glorifying God in everything.
1 John 4:19. We love
Yes,
because he first loved us.
that's right.
Amen.
Yo. All right, Donis, what about you? What you got?
Um, I would say the same thing. God gives me vocabulary words every season, and I don't know how long each season lasts. But intentional, be intentional. That was one of my vocabulary words for a long time, and he allows me to see situations like Tanya was saying, where I get the opportunity to practice being intentional. I can do it or I cannot do it. But in doing it, you can't just stumble into it. Now, I may not know what or how I'm going to do it, but the purpose is not to know what you're going to do, is to be intentional about doing something. In serving, how you serve, where you serve, what it looks like. You got to take yourself out of that. And just, if you allow yourself to be intentional, God will do the rest. And what I've learned in the business I'm doing with temperament assessments, some temperaments, you know, they're like, I don't want to do that. You know, but if you don't do it, you're putting up that wall. If you're going to be intentional, you got to lower that barrier. Allow yourself to become vulnerable. Yes, to the situation, but more so be vulnerable to God and allow him to do his work through you. Because the whole objective is that others see him through your actions.
Amen. Position ourselves under the cross so he can transform us. To be intentional. And I love that you guys kept bringing that out throughout these verses. So thank you. I mean, this has been great for our spiritual maturity, our discipleship, our understanding of what's happening here. So thank you guys for taking the time. I know you've had a busy week. I mean, thank you so much. And thank you, class, for joining us. Next week, Linda Lindsay is teaching us. And if you've never heard Linda Lindsay teach, you are in for a treat. Trust that. So hopefully everybody will join us again next week. Adonis and Tanya, I love y'all. Thank you so much for spending
Love you
time.
too.
Love first.
Love first.
Come on. Bye-bye.
Be intentional.
Come on.